Welcome back to the deep dive. Whenever we look at these massive historical shifts, wars, revolutions, big strategic decisions, it's so easy to focus on the huge, slow-moving forces.
Right, the big picture stuff.
Exactly. But often, the actual moment of change, the turning point, it's shockingly fragile and fast.
I like to think of history as a dam. The water rising behind it, that's the years of buildup, the politics, the tension, all the grievances. It's slow, it's crushing.
And in the spring of 1943, that water was the immense Allied pressure. They absolutely had to invade southern Europe, but, well, they were staring down the most heavily fortified coastline in the world.
Vestung Europa, Fortress Europe, and the crack in that dam. The moment it all breaks.
It's the moment the German High Command accepts a completely fraudulent waterlogged letter from a corpse as gospel truth.
It sounds like fiction.
It really does. Today, we are diving deep into Operation Mincemeat, the macabre, the ingenious, and you could argue the most successful deception of the entire Second World War.
And our mission today is really to unpack this for you, to explore how the fate of a continent hinged on this intricate, almost theatrical lie. We're going to trace it across three crucial phases.
Okay, what are they?
First, we're going to look at the immense pressure that forced the Allies to even consider something so dark and masterly.
Well, why?
The why. Then second, we'll stand right at that fragile fulcrum moment, a quiet office in Berlin where an analyst's choice changes everything.
How?
And finally, the what next. We will track that flood of consequences that followed, a chain reaction that leads directly to the fall of Mussolini and fundamentally reshapes the entire strategic map of the war.
The core tension here, I think, is just the sheer terrifying audacity of it all.
Oh, completely.
The fate of entire armies, you're talking over 150,000 soldiers ready to land, all of it hinged not on a battle fought with tanks and artillery, but on the meticulous contents of a dead man's pockets.
It's a story where the human element, the ability to tell a perfect lie, was, for a moment, far more powerful than any conventional weapon.
So let's start with that rising water, the pressure. What was the situation in early 1943?
Well, the strategic situation was pretty simple, but also brutal. The Allies had just successfully pushed the Axis out of North Africa. Operation Torch was a success.
A huge victory.
A huge victory. But it immediately raised the question, what now? The next logical, necessary step was to take the fight to the European continent. And if you look at a map,
the map just screams one destination, Sicily.
Screams Sicily. It's the gateway to Italy, what Churchill famously called the soft underbelly of Europe.
It gives you immediate access to the mainland. Strategically, it makes perfect, undeniable sense.
And that, of course, is the profound problem for the Allies.
Because it's too obvious.
It is far too obvious. Adolf Hitler saw it, too. He wasn't stupid. He knew exactly what the Allies' next move should be.
So he was already preparing for it.
He was already reinforcing the island heavily. He had created his Festung Europa Fortress Europe, this vast defensive system stretching from Norway all the way down the Mediterranean.
And in Sicily, this meant, what were the Allies actually facing?
It meant turning the beaches into a brutal wall of concrete, machine guns, and steel. Coastal batteries, minefields, panzer divisions held in reserve. He was anticipating the Allied attack and turning the island into a death trap.
So to launch Operation Husky, that was the code name for the invasion, right?
That's right.
To launch Operation Husky directly would mean attacking the enemy at his absolute strongest, most prepared point.
It's a frontal assault on a fortress. The initial waves of troops, they risked a prepared massacre. They knew the intelligence was clear on this. The defenses were strong and getting stronger every day.
So the pivotal question for Allied planners became, how do you do this? How do you land over 150,000 ground troops without walking into a killing field?
You can't go through the wall. You have to find a way to make the wall move. They needed a massive, absolutely undeniable distraction.
They had to convince the German High Command that Sicily was actually a feint?
Exactly. A secondary target designed to draw attention, while the real massive blow was going to fall somewhere else entirely.
And that military necessity, that desperation, drove them to look for solutions in the most unlikely places.
And the solution they found is incredible because it wasn't new at all. It was 4 years old. A forgotten piece of paper buried deep in a file cabinet.
And this is where we get the Trout Memo.
The Trout Memo.
Yeah.
Authored way back in 1939, it was this piece of imaginative theory, really. It was designed to elevate strategic deception from just, tactical trickery into an art form.
And the core analogy was what? Fly fishing?
Fly fishing.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. It compares misleading a wary, clever enemy which the German intelligence apparatus certainly was, to the subtle, patient skill of a trout fisherman.
How so?
Well, the idea is you have to dangle a lure that is so tempting, so perfectly designed to appeal to that fish's instincts that it cannot resist striking.
It's not just about fooling them, it's about psychology. There's that great quote from it, isn't there?
The trout fisher casts patiently all day, frequently changes his lures, but his main endeavor to attract fish by something he sends out is incessant.
So you're trying to create an irresistible narrative that plays right into their existing assumptions and fears.
Precisely. And here is where the names behind this memo become truly legendary.
Right.
It was co-authored by Rear Admiral John Godfrey, who was the Director of Naval Intelligence, and his imaginative young assistant.
A lieutenant commander named Ian Fleming,
The very same.
the future creator of James Bond. That explains so much about the scale of ambition here. I mean, the sheer Baroque detail and the level of risk involved. It feels straight out of a Cold War thriller.
It really does. And the memo, it had 54 different suggestions for how to mislead the Germans. A lot of them were outlandish, just designed to test the limits of what was possible.
But one idea stood out.
Suggestion number 28. It was purely grotesque.
And that idea was what became mincemeat.
The core of it, yes. Dressing a corpse in the uniform of a high-ranking officer, planting false documents on it, and then just letting it wash ashore somewhere the enemy would find it, seemingly by complete chance.
In 1939, that's macabre fiction. It's a dark fantasy.
But by early 1943, staring down the barrel of the Sicilian wall and the projected massive casualties, the completely unthinkable became the only viable military option.
And so necessity drove these two intelligence officers to turn this dark fantasy into a real high-stakes military operation.
These are the architects. Naval Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague and an RAF flight lieutenant with a name that's much harder to pronounce, Charles Cholmondeley.
How do you even say that? It looks like a typo waiting to happen.
It's pronounced Cholmondeley.
Chumley. Okay.
And these two, Montague and Cholmondeley, they were tasked with creating the entire reality around this terrible idea. They had to build a life, a career, a complete set of circumstances, convincing enough to fool the entire German intelligence structure.
And the operation was given a code name? It was selected randomly from a list, right? Just to avoid revealing any clues.
Yes, and the name they got was Operation Mincemeat, which, when you think about it, kind of suggests the inherent risk and the disposable nature of the whole project.
So part 2, forging the ghost. Where do you even begin with something like this?
Well, the first step was by far the most challenging, both technically and ethically. To make the dead speak a believable lie, you needed a body.
And not just anybody.
No, you needed a body that could withstand intense scrutiny. You had to assume that if the Germans recovered the documents, they would absolutely perform a full autopsy on the body to authenticate the story of the man who carried them.
So you couldn't use a soldier killed in action. An examination would show a bullet wound or shrapnel, something that would instantly expose the lie that he died in a plane crash at sea.
Exactly. You needed what they called a perfect blank slate.
And they found him.
They found him in a London morgue on January 24th, 1943. It was the body of a man named Glenrohr Michael.
Who was?
He was a homeless Welshman who had, tragically, died from ingesting rat poison.
Now that detail is so critically important, isn't it? It really goes against the more romanticized versions of this story. They didn't just grab anybody. They specifically looked for a pathology that would support the ruse.
Precisely. They were incredibly meticulous. They consulted with the most celebrated pathologist of the day, Sir Bernard Spilsbury, a man whose medical authority was just unimpeachable.
And Spilsbury's opinion was what?
He confirmed that after the body had been in cold seawater for a sufficient time, the internal effects of the rat poison would make the cause of death almost impossible to distinguish from death by drowning or, say, heart failure after prolonged immersion in cold water.
So the poison was the medical blank slate they needed. The body had to tell the story of a man who died at sea, not on land.
And with the body secured, the mission shifted. It went from this grim search to an elaborate, almost novelistic creative act. Montague and Cholmondeley had to make the ghost they were forging more alive, more believable than the corpse he was inhabiting.
So they gave him a name.
They christened him Major William Martin, Royal Marines, and they began constructing his entire life from scratch.
Based on Montague's own notes and other research, the team just obsessed over the smallest details, didn't they?
They did, because they understood this fundamental truth of intelligence. German analysts would look for the official documents, yes. But they would only believe the official documents if they first completely believed the man who carried them.
It's psychological profiling at its absolute finest. They had to invent his routine, his failings, his anxieties, his love life. They were creating an entire persona, not just putting a uniform on a body.
They filled his pockets with what they brilliantly called wallet litter.
Wallet litter. I love that term.
Think about what's in your own wallet right now. It's never just your ID and your credit cards.
Yeah, you've got old receipts, maybe a ticket stub.
Exactly. So for Major Martin, they included a ticket stub from a London theater, dated just before he supposedly left England. It implied he had a normal social life.
And this is where the genius of the detail really comes in. They included an overdraft notice from his bank.
That's my favorite part. It was a detail specifically designed to suggest human carelessness. A man juggling debts, maybe a bit distracted, utterly relatable, and therefore utterly real.
Because a perfect professional spy wouldn't have an overdraft notice in his pocket, Major Martin was designed to be perfectly imperfect.
And to really anchor the emotional reality of his life, they gave him a fiancée.
Pam.
A fictitious fiancée named Pam, complete with a real photograph. It was a picture of an MI5 clerk and two poignant, slightly sentimental love letters tucked away in his wallet.
And the letters weren't just filler, were they? They were part of the narrative.
They were crafted to reinforce the idea that he was rushing back to England to see her to get married. Every single piece of paper, from the bank notice to Pam's letters, was a meticulously placed psychological breadcrumb. It was all designed to establish the man's credibility before the Germans even got to the critical military documents.
So once Major Martin was established as this real, flawed human being, they had to craft the central lie, the actual document that would achieve the strategic goal.
The whole point of the exercise. And this letter had to be perfect. It went all the way up and was approved by the Chiefs of Staff on April 13th, 1943. They gave the final green light to this elaborate deception.
And the document itself, what was it?
It was a fabricated letter. It was supposedly written by a very high-ranking officer, Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Nye, the Vice Chief of the Imperial General Staff.
So a name they'd recognize.
A big name. And it was designed to look casual, conversational. It was slipped in alongside Martin's personal papers, as if it were just a piece of sensitive but routine correspondence that careful officer was carrying by hand back to the field in North Africa.
And the content was masterful.
It was. It had these carefully worded phrases that strongly suggested the Allies were planning to invade Greece and Sardinia.
Or real targets.
The fake, real targets. And it confirmed that Sicily was merely a massive feint, a diversionary operation to draw attention away. The lie wasn't shouted. It was whispered within what looked like believable, low-key military bureaucracy.
The ghost is fully forged. It's time for deployment.
Yes. On April 19, 1943, the body of Major Martin, sealed inside a special steel canister to preserve it, departed from Holy Loch, Scotland. It was loaded aboard the submarine HMS Seraph.
I can only imagine the tension on that vessel. For 11 days, the crew lived alongside this silent passenger, knowing that the entire upcoming invasion and the lives of thousands hinged on this bizarre cargo.
The stakes were astronomical. Their destination was the coast of Huelva in Spain.
And why Huelva?
It was chosen very strategically. Spain, under Franco, was officially neutral, but Huelva was known to be absolutely teeming with German spies and Nazi sympathizers. They were confident the body would be found by the Spanish and that the documents would very quickly be passed into German hands.
So the physical fulcrum moment arrives in the pre-dawn blackness of April 30th, 1943.
The submarine circuses. The crew removes the body from the canister, which had been perfectly preserved in dry ice. They gently slid Major Martin into the cold Atlantic waters.
And a briefcase.
Chained tightly to his wrist. The final touch.
As the HMS Seraph slipped back beneath the waves, the operation was now completely out of their control.
Montague and Cholmondeley had done their part. The success or failure was now, as they admitted, left entirely to chance, the tide, and the hope that their bait would be taken.
And chance delivered almost instantly.
It did. At approximately 9:30 a.m. on that very same morning, a local Spanish fisherman named José Antonio Rey Maria discovered the uniformed body floating in the swell. The documents were officially in play.
So the body is found. The Spanish authorities recover the corpse and, crucially, the briefcase.
Right. And from there, the documents begin their journey. They're carefully moved from the Spanish morgue to a German embassy, and eventually, by secure courier, they travel 1,000 miles to the German High Command in Berlin for analysis.
But before those documents even reached Berlin, history almost cracked in a totally different, catastrophic direction for the Allies.
It very nearly did.
Because the success of Mincemeat hinged not just on the Germans finding the body, but on them failing to follow standard investigative procedures when authenticating it.
This is a huge point. The entire operation nearly failed because of the process in Spain, specifically because of a single Spanish coroner.
This is the near miss.
This is the near miss. The doctor who examined the corpse, a man named Eduardo Fajardo, was secretly pro-British. And against all standard procedure, against everything required of a professional medical examiner, he did not perform a full invasive autopsy.
And that decision, that was everything.
It was the single most crucial implication in the document's journey. A more thorough professional examination would have instantly revealed that Glyndŵr Michael had not drowned at sea.
They would have found traces of the rat poison or other anomalies?
Exactly. The elaborate ruse would have instantly unraveled, and the Allied invasion of Sicily would have been met by the full, prepared force of German defenses. A bloodbath.
Just think about that fragility. The success of Operation Husky, thousands of lives saved, it all rested on one man's conscience and his decision to file an incomplete report in a Spanish morgue.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But the incomplete report stood. The documents were passed up the line, authenticated at the local level as legitimate, and sent on their way to Berlin.
And in the German capital, every piece of intelligence from the Western Front had to pass the desk of one man before it reached the Führer.
Major Alexis von Rohen.
Who was he?
He was the head of Foreign Armies West, and he was Hitler's trusted gatekeeper for this kind of intelligence. If there was a deception afoot, he was the man who was supposed to spot it. He was a professional, a meticulous analyst, and he was highly respected within the high command.
That was a secret.
A profound historical irony, which was completely unknown to the entire Nazi establishment. Von Rohen was a dedicated, covert anti-Nazi. He was a quiet conspirator in the German resistance.
So this is the pivotal moment, the crack in the dam that changes the course of the war. These documents, detailing a fake invasion of Greece and Sardinia, land on his desk in May of 1943.
And he's an expert. He must have seen the subtle flaws, maybe the slightly questionable tone of the letters, the minor logistical inconsistencies that a truly objective analyst would flag as suspicious.
So this was his ultimate dilemma.
It was. He could expose the flaws in the documents, prove his loyalty and professional competence to the regime he despised, or he could validate them, put his career and his life on the line to steer the Führer toward a strategic disaster.
And his choice was?
Active collusion. He didn't just passively accept the files and pass them on. No, he personally vouched for the intelligence. He wrote a glowing assessment for Hitler, declaring the documents absolutely convincing.
He sold the lie.
He sold the lie. He became the ghost in the machine, ensuring his master believed the ghost story.
And his assessment worked. This is the official fulcrum moment. On May 14th, 1943, Hitler reads von Rohen's validated report.
And he swallows it completely, hook, line, and sinker.
The Führer immediately declared that the information was not to be questioned. He countermanded his own generals, men on the ground who were arguing that Sicily was the logical target. He was convinced Sicily was just a feint, and he ordered immediate massive reinforcements to Greece and Sardinia.
And the British didn't have to wait long to know their fantastic gamble had paid off.
This is where ultiare comes in.
Exactly. The ultiare intercepts, this incredible intelligence they were gathering from decrypted German communications, all flowing out of Bletchley Park, confirmed the success.
Let's just pause on ultiare for a second because it's so vital here. This wasn't just, decoded messages. It was real-time insight into the highest levels of German strategic thinking.
They were essentially reading Hitler's mail.
So when the British saw the orders going out, when they saw German generals physically shifting entire divisions based on Major Martin's documents, they knew the deception was total.
And the message sent back to Winston Churchill couldn't have been clearer or more triumphant.
Mincemeat swallowed rod, line, and sinker.
And because of that singular decision made by von Rohen in a quiet Berlin office, Hitler's orders created these massive, catastrophic consequences for the German war machine. This was the beginning of the unraveling of Fortress Europe.
We can actually track the specific military units that were moved, Count.
Oh, yes. The paper trail is clear. Hitler immediately ordered the formidable 1st Panzer Division, one of his most elite veteran armored units, to be moved all the way from France to Greece.
From France to Greece, to counter a phantom threat.
Think about the logistical nightmare. The immense drain on fuel, on transport, on time, all because Hitler believed the dead man's documents.
So the diversion didn't stop there.
Not at all. 2 entire German armored divisions were diverted away from Sicily, which was, of course, the actual target. And on top of that, the number of German troops sent to Sardinia was doubled.
All based on the fictitious threat outlined in Major Martin's briefcase.
Meanwhile, German generals on the ground, like Field Marshal Albert Kesselring in Italy, were arguing passionately that Sicily was the obvious, logical target. They questioned the strange coincidence of these documents just washing ashore.
But their protests were dismissed.
Immediately dismissed. The dead man's documents, vouched for by von Rohen, had become Führer-level gospel. Hitler was simply certain. He was convinced that he had seen through the Allied feint.
And as the historian Dennis Smith argued, this deception was so effective because it was tailored. It was based on intelligence from Bletchley Park, and it was designed to play directly into Hitler's own biases.
Yes, his existing strategic fears about the Balkans and the Eastern Mediterranean. Hitler always had this fixation, this paranoia, about a blow against the historically sensitive regions of Greece and the Aegean. Mincemeat gave him the perfect confirmation of his own paranoia.
So this all sets the stage for the real invasion, Operation Husky.
It does. On July 9, 1943, the invasion is launched. Allied forces, over 150,000 strong, they were prepared for a brutal, protracted fight.
The planners had predicted a 90-day campaign, right? Given what they thought they were up against.
They did. They expected massive resistance from a fully fortified target, but the resistance they met was, well, according to the accounts, it was a shadow of what it should have been.
The beaches were less fortified, the counterattacks were weaker.
And crucially, they lacked the elite armored support they needed for a sustained defense. The very panzer divisions that should have been there to meet them on the beaches were hundreds of miles away, guarding non-existent invasion targets in the Aegean.
And the result was just stunning. The campaign didn't last 90 days.
It lasted only 38 days. Allied forces had full control by August 17, 1943.
The reduction in anticipated casualties must have been immense.
Tens of thousands of lives were saved, and the strategic timeline of the entire Mediterranean War was drastically accelerated.
But the success of Husky was more than just a military victory. It caused this massive political earthquake across Europe.
It did. That rapid, stunning victory exposed the absolute, undeniable weakness of Benito Mussolini's fascist regime. The myth of Il Duce, who had promised total Italian strength and dominance. It was undone by the lie carried by Major Martin.
And the shockwave hit Rome almost immediately.
Mussolini's own Grand Council, the highest body of the fascist party, they convened on July 24, 1943. Seeing the rapid Allied advance into Italy's home territory, they were just galvanized by this profound sense of failure and self-preservation.
And they voted him out.
They voted decisively to strip him of his power, and the very next day, the dictator who had ruled Italy for over 2 decades was arrested and driven away unceremoniously in an ambulance. It was a pathetic, swift end to his reign.
And this collapse. It's a direct, traceable consequence of the corpse that washed ashore in Spain 3 months earlier.
Absolutely. Italy's will to fight just evaporated. The new Italian government officially surrendered in September 1943. The first major pillar of the Axis alliance had collapsed, and this immediately opened up a new, massive front in Europe.
So the strategic impact of this single deception just keeps rippling outwards for the rest of the war.
It does. Hitler was now forced to occupy his former ally, Italy. He had to prevent its immediate collapse and stop the Allies from using the entire peninsula as a launching pad into Germany.
And that required a huge diversion of resources.
Dozens of German divisions, troops, tanks, planes, vast material resources that should have been reinforcing the Eastern Front against the Soviets, or fortifying the Atlantic Wall in preparation for D-Day.
So it fundamentally altered the strategic map of the Second World War.
A single, perfectly executed deception created this massive 2-year drain on German resources in a theater they never intended to fully defend. All thanks to a waterlogged briefcase and the choices of a few key individuals. The entire German war effort was subtly but powerfully derailed.
So in the end, Operation Mincemeat isn't just a story about intelligence work. It's really a story of ghosts and decisions and the immense power of a good narrative.
And the body at the center of it all, it remained a mystery for decades. He was buried in a Spanish cemetery under that false name, Major William Martin. The world only learned his true identity as Glendro Michael, a homeless man from Wales in 1996.
He's a man who, in death, became a weapon of unparalleled strategic power. You could say he saved more lives than most generals in the Allied command just by being the perfect silent lie.
But as we've detailed, the success really rested on this most fragile chain of improbable events.
Let's just recap that chain. It's incredible.
Think about the precision required. You needed the right body found at the right time. You needed the right coroner, Dr. Fajardo, filing that incomplete report based on his own conscience.
You needed the right fisherman to even find the body in the first place. And then, critically, you needed the right conflicted analyst sitting in Berlin.
Alexis von Rhein.
He was the true ghost in the Nazi machine. He had the total power to expose the lie, yet he actively chose to betray his regime, and he personally guided his Führer toward strategic disaster.
He used his position of trust to accelerate the war's end, sacrificing his own safety in the process.
Which brings us back to what you called the fragility thesis. If von Rohen had been a loyal Nazi or even just a bureaucrat doing his job without any ideological conflict,
He would have spotted the flaws. The deception would have collapsed, and the invasion of Sicily would have been a bloodbath. It is an almost unbelievable fulcrum moment.
and that, for me, is the ultimate takeaway from this deep dive. History that summer wasn't determined solely by these grand, impersonal forces, by the mass production of tanks or the size of armies. It was determined by an individual making a split-second, conscience-driven decision in a quiet office in Berlin, choosing to lie to his own leader for what he believed was the greater good.
And von Rohen paid the ultimate price for that choice. He was later arrested and executed for his role in the July 1944 plot to kill Hitler. But his action remains one of the most consequential acts of subtle, internal wartime sabotage in the entire conflict.
The political map of modern Italy, the timeline of the war, the fate of thousands of soldiers. It was all balanced on the secret conviction of a single man who chose treason to hasten the end of his regime.
It just proves that the world we live in today is built on these invisible, improbable moments of personal choice, far more often than we realize.
So that leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener.
What other invisible hinges is our world turning on right now? These moments of profound fragility, balanced on a single decision that we won't understand until decades later. That is something for you to mull or explore on your own.
Indeed, something to mull over until our next deep dive. Thanks for listening.